Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Cosmic Convos, where I, Cassie, try to just talk to you guys the same way that I advise and talk to the clients that I see. I am a psychic medium. I dive into a lot of different spiritual topics and subjects, and usually pull from my own knowledge as well as my own experiences from working within the psychic realm in a professional way. So, I want to talk about spirit communication and messages because I get so many people all the time that are questioning, is this my ego? Am I crazy? Am I hearing things? This happens a lot of times to people who have spiritual gifts like mediumship, or even, intuitive, um, empath empathic ability that turns into like a physical manifestation of being able to actually hear and feel emotion at the same time. And that's a whole other story, so I won't jump into that one because that would take all the time that we have. But these abilities manifest in so many different ways, and we're all so unique in the way that we experience our abilities if you have experienced them. So, I want to briefly kind of bring up a few different stories here about spirit communication and messages. And then at the end, I'll kind of leave you off with some advice and tips on what to do if you're trying to tap into spirit communication and do some divination work. So, the first one that I want to talk about is my own personal experience of how I actually came into realizing that I'm psychic, or at least a medium. And it took me a long time to accept that title and want to call myself that because I really thought maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm making these things up in my mind. Maybe I'm hearing things. And I find that a lot of people that have abilities go through that phase of requiring trust from themselves. Um, I feel like everyone that I've spoken with that has abilities has always, at some point early on, doubted and misbelieved and thought they were crazy. So for me personally, the way that I started to realize that maybe I'm not crazy is I actually would start getting all these thoughts in my head. I would hear them. Some of them would be in my own voice, some of them would be in a voice that I could tell was not mine. And what I started to observe and realize is that the things that I heard talking to me, they did not share my personality. I have a pretty upbeat, sarcastic, bubbly personality, very positive, and that's just how I am, and that's just the energy I hold. And some of these other energies would be very curt, would be very blunt. They would have an unemotional way of talking, or they would use terms and words that I would never use, where they had a lot of endearment in the conversations that we were having. And I started to just realize this isn't how I would talk to myself. And I also started to know they're saying things that I don't want to hear. They're telling me answers, and I don't want that answer. I want a different answer. They're telling me information about myself, about my decisions, about where I need to grow. And it would hurt because it was kind of very blunt. It was very in your face. You can't misunderstand and misinterpret what's being said. So I started to realize I don't talk to myself this way, and I'm not as real as I probably should be with myself either, but these voices are. So maybe they're not mine. When I finally got over that hump, that's when I truly started to lean in and actually allow these conversations to take place without thinking and dismissing them, and thinking that, excuse me, maybe this is me talking to me and I'm crazy. I stopped thinking that way and I allowed the conversation to just happen in a very fluid way. I would respond, I would ask questions, I would act like I was talking to someone sitting right across the table from me. And the conversations began to develop and mature in a very beautiful way where I could call them in and I could talk to them. At this point, I still wasn't even sure who I was talking to, but I've always been intuitive and very sensitive to energy. So I knew it wasn't anything negative. And if I did feel anything negative, I would immediately tell it to leave, and I would, cast it out and tell it, I don't want to talk to you. And it would go away and I wouldn't have any issues. So I engaged in these conversations because I felt very comfortable, because I had already fully developed my own energetic sensitivity and intuitiveness, where I could feel an energy and really understand if I needed to be around it or not. So that was my own personal start. There's been clients that I've spoken with that have had a very similar beginning and start to it. Some of them say they would get warnings about things that would happen in the future. And that's how they started to realize that maybe this isn't me talking to me, because the information coming in is precognitive. It's very futuristic and it happens. They would get, feelings of things that would occur, of people, of situations, and then it would happen. So they started to realize maybe it's not me. Um, as far as the other psychics that I've gotten to know and worked with, they've also, and they've had strong, amazing abilities, and yet they've also doubted themselves in the beginning of their journey. And that's a part of the journey, is learning how to trust yourself, honestly. I don't think anyone gets the pleasure of jumping into any kind of spiritual work, psychic, mediumship, reiki, healing, channeling, anything, without overcoming a moment of doubt and having to realize this is beyond me and it's working through me and with me, and I can trust it. And that trust is so imperative, because it's difficult to work in any spiritual capacity, even with your own spirituality, if you don't trust the information you're getting. I always tell my clients, your abilities are like a muscle. It's the same with basic abilities like intuition, which we all have. The more you practice it, the more you use it, it's like a muscle. It gets stronger. It comes in faster. It comes in more clear. But the more that you doubt it, that you don't trust it, that you don't listen to it, and you don't take the guidance and heed what's being said, it stops working. It gets very weak. The muscle never gets used, and eventually it goes limp. It never leaves, just because you don't work your limbs out. They don't just drop off and leave. You just have a very weak muscle tone. You have weak strength in those limbs. But when you start to work them out, you feed them, you pay attention to them, you care about what's going into your body, you care about how you're using those muscles. They begin to strengthen and grow and become stronger and stronger. The same thing works for all the abilities, all the intuitiveness that you could possibly have in the world. Now, if you're going through one of those moments where you're having to realize I'm not talking to myself maybe, or I'm not hearing things, this is something real, and you're trying to struggle through that kind of internal battle, I always recommend, get a psychic reading from someone that you trust. There's something called spiritual coaching, is at least what we call it. And those are usually people with abilities that don't realize they have abilities, but they're having all these experiences and they don't know what to make of it. And they just need clarity on what they have and how to work through it. And that's one of the things that I'm able to look at when I do energy work, is go into that person's energy as if it's my own. I start to experience the experiences they're having. But because I'm very comfortable and very exposed to the psychic world, the mediumship world, the abilities and things like this, and I have tapped into my own guides in a positive enough way that I can ask them to explain to me what's happening, I use that direct experience to be able to understand what that person's ability is and how they can control it, how they would perceive things, ways that they can either build it or block it. So go to someone that is psychic, that's very familiar with abilities, that's comfortable talking about it, and you could tell that they have a very good relationship with their own guides and their own abilities, and let them help you. Let them be that validation. 99% of my readings are validation, okay? Spirits and guides and things like this, they'll communicate with you all the time, but until you're ready to hear it, that message never quite comes through clearly. Other ways that they communicate, even outside of abilities, are things like angel numbers, where you're seeing synchronicities all over the place, having random interactions with people where they're telling you things about their life, and somehow there's a complete resonance there. Meeting your soul family. There's so many ways that spirit chooses to communicate with you, even with divination, which, let's dive into that to kind of close this out. Some ideas for divination: tarot cards, runes, scribing, things like this. You can look so many different divination techniques up and dive into them. Just make sure you research it so you're doing it in a safe way. But that is going to be the close of this convo. If you want to hear more, message me and I'll elaborate more on anything that you guys feel you want to hear more about. Otherwise, thanks for joining me. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you soon. Bye.